You're watching the 2018 Legatus Summit.
Congratulations again to Mr. Warsaw, and I offer special thanks for giving me a chance to be on that network every Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern. All right. Quick story, Mother Angelica promised that she would never have a cooking show, and I think the only reason why I'm on there is because my show's not a cooking show. It's a show about faith that uses food as a vehicle. And so what we are going to do now is learn a little bit about our presenter. So honored to introduce formerly President Reagan's Associate Director for Economics and Planning. Mr. Larry Kudlow is a well-regarded business and media personality, host of The Larry Kudlow Show, a WABC radio show in 183 cities, and a CNBC senior contributor, previous host of The Kudlow Report. Mr. Kudlow has been the recent advisor to the Trump presidential campaign and is nationally syndicated columnist, contributing editor of National Review magazine, and economics editor for the National Review Online, as well as being the CEO of Kudlow & Company, an economic research firm. His latest book is JFK and the Reagan Revolution, published in 2016. He likewise authored American Abundance, the New Economic and Moral Prosperity. Mr. Kudlow converted to Catholicism from Judaism 20 years ago during a low point in his personal and professional life. In contrast to his high-profile persona, Mr. Kudlow lives his Catholic faith quietly, but not silently. He is an active participant in his parish, hopefully in the Finance Committee, and recipient of numerous awards for humanitarian and community involvement. So once elapsed from Judaism, he explored Catholicism over the course of 7 years and now admits it's ultimately transformed his entire life. And I just also received this bit of information. Mr. Kudlow is singularly responsible for Mr. President Trump's recent decision and his tax cut. And so for that reason, I really thank him. So let's welcome Mr. Larry Kudlow. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. You're very kind. You really have to walk a mile to the men's room here. I don't know what he said. I hope it was good. If not, we'll correct it. Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it. Great honor. Anything for Tom. Anything, Tom Monahan. Really, I mean that. I know he's gotten lots of awards tonight, and he's a great man. But in my time, knowing Tom, there is no one who has the grace and the intelligence and the drive and the faith, the devotion that Tom Monahan has. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to come down here. And I guess both Tom and George Schwartz from Ave Maria said I was going to say, look, blessedly, I'm not going to talk about tax cuts. But they said I should. A little business, a little economics, not much, a little bit. We're in pretty good shape, by the way. America's on the rise, on the mend. I'm not going to go deep into it, but we're in pretty good shape. And I think it's going to get better. And having worked in the campaign a bit and still involved a bit, a lot of promises are being kept. And a lot of optimism. So important to be optimistic. I hate it when it's pessimistic. It's been pessimistic for many years. I'm an old Reagan guy. I was one of his budget deputies way back in the first term, and he taught me a lot about optimism. And so what we're seeing now is a tremendous resurgence of optimism. And I think it's just what the country needs. And again, I'm not going to go deep into this, but we're on pretty solid ground. Pretty solid ground. In fact, we were talking at the table, the response to these tax cuts by the big companies is probably greater than anybody, including myself, thought. I've never seen anything like it. Just right out of the chute, 250 big companies investing and providing higher wages. So it's great stuff. And, keep your taxes down, keep your regulations down, keep the dollar sound, reward success, stop punishing businesses, stop punishing investors. Let's not make this any harder than it needs to be, okay? And we're doing that. We're doing that. Thank you. But principally, I want to talk about faith. Faith. I was at a Christmas party a while back, and the host, is an annual affair, 40 or 50 people, and he asked people to speak. I didn't think I was on the list because he didn't ask me beforehand, but he did, caught me by surprise. So I just kind of got up and gave a little talk about Christmas, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, the birth of Jesus Christ. And I read some passages from Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount, which is a good thing to read. The Sermon on the Mount. Easy, doesn't take a long time. There's a lot of very important things in the Sermon on the Mount, including the Golden Rule, including the Lord's Prayer. But the reason I raise it at that Christmas party, and there were a lot of non-Catholics there, they enjoyed it. The host put it out and sent it to all the guests, and this is what I want to talk about this evening in brief. In terms of our culture, in terms of our values, our morals, in terms of our behavior, it just strikes me that we can do a little better than we've been doing. And I am far from perfect, far, far from perfect, but it's something I work on, and it's something I think a lot about. I'm active, obviously, I'm a broadcaster, worked on Wall Street, economist, been in the government, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of secularization, and just in general, kind of people are putting aside religion and putting aside, the values of religion. Religious teaching, in some sense, not only tells you what Christ has said, but it tells you how to behave on a day-to-day basis. Now, again, I'm far from perfect, but it's something to think about. If you leave tonight and take away nothing, inside the Bible, inside the Old and New Testament, inside the teaching of Christ, there's a lot of important things to live by daily. Daily. When I get up in the morning, again, an imperfect vessel, I try to think about that. I try to let God direct my life. I try to let him give me some sense of, give me some guides, give me some calmness. I've said for many years that when you go to work in the morning, when you go to the office, and you hang up your hat and coat or whatever, please don't hang up your values. Please don't leave your values outside, because you need to exercise them in the way the Lord wants during business, as well as at home, and of course in church. Now, that's not a really radical thought, but I guess in today's environment, it's something of a different thought. Something of a different thought. One of the great things about the Sermon on the Mount, let me just read a couple of, I'm not going to go through all of it, but it's a couple of things worth pondering. The Golden Rule. This is according to Matthew. Christ says, "But I say unto you, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Do unto others as you would have them do to you." The Golden Rule. I sort of simplify this by thinking, as we go through the day, we should think about helping people, not harming them. In a million different ways, from big things to small things, actions. Help them. Don't harm them. Even your enemies. Listen, I've been in the battleground for years. People come after me. I did a TV show for a long time, still on the air on TV and radio. People come after me, hammer and tongs. But you know what? I'm not perfect. There's a few I'd like to have back. But in the main, I try to listen and respond, even though I may disagree. Good skill to have just for daily living. And I think we forget about that. There's not enough civility in life today. There's not enough. That I know as a fact. And I'm not here to scold. I'm not a scold. I'm just trying to make things better. I'm a perpetual optimist and believe that things can and will be better, and may be better perhaps, today, tomorrow, the next day. But if I want to persuade you of something, we just went through this big tax cut debate in Washington, and I was very active in it, working people in the Senate and the House. And a good way not to persuade someone who might disagree with you, a good way not to do it is to yell at them, insult them, smear them, or worse, call them names. That's a good thing not to do. A good thing to do is to try to make your arguments as fact-based as possible and actually respond to what the other person worries about. What's on your mind? I always say that. We got a couple of Republican Senate votes that I never thought we were going to get. I'm a soft sell kind of guy, usually. What's on your mind? Tell me. How can we be helpful? And I didn't mean it in a horse trading sense. I just meant it in a generic sense. Supply-side tax cuts work. Just look at JFK and Reagan and so forth, and we were doing it again. But, I try to reason, not yell or insult. I think there's something there. We can learn that. Nobody's perfect in public life. You can always do better. But I think it's something that, it comes directly from the Sermon on the Mount. And other things as well. I'm not going to bore you by reading the whole thing, but I do want to read a couple things. Jesus, this is from Matthew 4. Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brethren, Simon, called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And you know this story. And he saith unto them, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Now that's a story as old as life itself. And they straightway left their nets and followed him. So what am I driving at? Well, Christ is saying, in some sense, to be a fisher of men, to follow me, to abide by my teaching and my values and my behavior, and to go out and try to spread the word and the message, not only by talking, but by your own behavior, by your personal example. That's a great way to do it. Instead of fighting, yelling, smearing, insulting, by your personal example. That's why I love that line so much. Be fishers of men. And last one, and this is from Matthew 25. Last one. This is Jesus talking about the less benefits, the poor, helping others. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared to you from the foundation of the world. Now, Jesus says, For I was hungered, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me in. Naked, and yet clothed. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came unto me. And then he concludes, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of my brethren, ye have done it for me. For the least of my brethren, you have done it for Christ. Help folks. Help them. In all stations of life. Successful people, less successful people, poor people. Help them. Have a heart. Have a heart. very important, Matthew 25. There's a lot of work been done on that phrase. Arthur Brooks of the American Enterprise Institute has written at length about that. I've interviewed Arthur. I've written about it. Help others. Help them, don't harm them. Improve our culture. Improve our behavior. And do it, in some sense, by personal example. Faith without works is dead. It's James. Faith without works is dead. So I'm an imperfect vessel, but I come to you with these thoughts. And I will tell you with honesty and an enormous amount of humility, it has worked in my life. I mean, I've had my ups and downs. The Lord has been very good to me. It's why I try to live by his faith every day. I fell off my horse 20 plus years ago. I was kind of a hopeless, incurable abuser of alcohol and drugs. I had a great life and a great career and a great marriage, and it all blew up. It blew up because I made very bad decisions, didn't listen to any guidance, and had no faith. I was born into a very secular family that did not practice Judaism. Others did, but we didn't. And I was lost in faith. And I have not had a drink or a drug now in almost 23 years because I followed God. I say this, in a sense, matter-of-factly, because what I'm trying to illustrate is in my recovery, faith plays a central role in my living, my daily living. And that's why, I read prayers. That's why I go back and talk about the Sermon on the Mount. That's why I try to harm people or help people rather than harm them. So I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but I will say this. I was introduced to a faith-based recovery program at a rehab up in northern Minnesota. I was there for 5 months plus, a long time. And I, got it. I studied. I listened. And when I came back to life, or public life, which nobody was particularly sure of, as I said, I had a pretty good career in government and Wall Street. I had one job offer when I left the Hazelton Foundation, one job offer. And that's from my dear friend Arthur Laffer, who said, come live with me in San Diego and work with me, and we'll get you back into your life, your new life. And the counselors at that place had advised me not to go back to New York City for a couple of years. And they loved it, the idea of going to San Diego. Not that there weren't alcohol and drugs in San Diego. There are. But on the other hand, I couldn't get them in 5 minutes, and it took me out of that whole scene, if you will. It's the best thing I ever did. In fact, following directions and guidance from the professionals and following directions and guidance from sober people these last 23 years has served me very well. I do not make a decision alone, ever. And I pray for help and guidance from the Lord, and I ask my sober friends what they think I should do, people that don't know anything about my career, but want me to stay sober and calm, and it works. It kind of takes the burden off my shoulders. I don't have to do it alone. Someone who counseled me in the early 1990s, Father C. John McCluskey. I met him through a friend, he's a wonderful man, phenomenal person, Father John McCluskey, C. John McCluskey. You ever have a chance to see him or read his writings, you should. He's remarkable. He knew way back that I was in trouble. He knew before I knew I was in trouble. And he was giving me some counseling. He knew I was somehow trying to search my way through some faith of some sort without any clarity. And when I came out of the rehab and was living in San Diego, he actually flew out from Washington to talk to me and counsel me. And when I finally returned to public life, he would visit me. In those days, I was a senior editor of the National Review magazine. Bill Buckley, wonderful man, who also helped me. And Father C. John would show up in the office, and he would start teaching me, catechism, stuff that you know much better than I know. But it took, over time, it took. No rush. And I went to Mass and loved it. I love the order and the ceremony of the church, the Catholic Church. I did probably from the very first Mass I went to. I just liked it. It just seems like, Larry, just do this, and you're going to be okay. We don't know how exactly, but you're going to be okay. And you know what? That thought was a very important thought. And I became a regular Mass goer and eventually was received into the church. To this day, I don't know how Father John and his friends did it. Archdiocese of New York. No one ever talked politics. I didn't have a clean track record, but they did it. And so I was baptized in November 1997. So I'm 20 years plus. But the key point for me in all this, and I say this with deep humility, is that leading a life of faith as a layperson has changed my life. And it's changed my life for the better, on all counts, on all counts. In fact, almost unbeknownst to me, it changed my career. And suddenly I was hosting TV shows twice a day for like 15 years. And I'm still working hard at it, and a radio show every weekend. Came out of nowhere. I never saw it coming and loved it. And that's because I believe God and Lord Jesus were guiding me and directing me. And they don't tell you what they want specifically, but if you're in that zone, you will know. I knew, and has made my life enormously better. My worst days nowadays are so much better than they were over 20 years ago. And so I continue to lead a life of faith. I'm active in the church. We have a little church. I was baptized in New York, St. Thomas More, but on the weekends we have a home in Connecticut, and St. Patrick Church in Reading, Connecticut. It's about 450 parishioners, of whom, on a good year, 150 show up regularly. That's it. I know this. I've been paying for my sins. I've been the president of the parish council for many years. I actively serve on Bishop Caggiano's boards in Bridgeport for the diocese. He has told me many times, none of this assures me of a trip to heaven. I get that. I'm still working hard. I fly down for evening speeches, even though I'm half exhausted. Not whatever it takes. I'm trying to try to do it and help out. But you know, along the way, you really do learn something. That's part of my message. And it does go back to the issue of daily behavior. You know, I have a very good pastor, and sometimes we talk about the homilies. And I always say to myself and to him, Father Joe, good man, you know, Father, that was a great reading today, a great reading. You might want to think about illuminating those thoughts and even applying them to our daily life and values. Now, I don't want to be pushy, you know. I'm a layperson. But I have thoughts. I'm a persuader. Politicians, government, investors, even the occasional priest. I like to persuade. Always in a nice way. He hasn't thrown me out yet. It's been a lot of years. But I love it. One of my favorite tales in this area of my life, for many years, I've been the head usher at the 12 noon Mass. On a good Sunday, we pull in 80 people. On a good Sunday, head usher. And the part of the story that makes me really proud is not that I was a head usher, but I worked my way up from deputy head usher. That's true. It's a true story. I just kept showing up. And the head usher was a lovely man, elderly man, Purple Heart in Korean War, and he passed away, and there I was. Still standing with a basket. Enjoying life enormously. Just a wee bit of politics in the economy. We're talking about, you know, persuasion and civility, and to help people, not harm them. I've written a couple books. The most recent one was out about 18 months ago. It's my pride and joy with my co-author, Brian Dimitrovic. It's called JFK and the Reagan Revolution. Somebody told me when I was coming down here that some of these books might be out there to be sold. I don't want to push that too much. JFK and the Reagan Revolution. Or you can click right through on Amazon. It's very easy. But one of the things we talked about in this book had a lot to do with civility and bipartisanship in politics and public service, okay? Which today is not our strongest suit, okay? Kennedy and Reagan were, in my opinion, great men. They were flawed men, as we all are. But at least in my neck of the woods on the economy, you may not know this, and I'm not going to dwell on it, because I know you're going to buy the book, but John F. Kennedy was actually the first tax-cutting supply-sider, 20 years before Reagan did it. And Kennedy was an unusual man because he used the Republican Treasury Secretary to guide him away from the old New Deal ideas of spending and taxing and regulating and letting a free economy work, and to lower the tax burden. Very much like this story today, the arguments today. And Kennedy had lots of trouble getting it through his own Democratic Party and lots of trouble getting it through the Republican Party. But he was very good at meeting and conversing with people who disagreed with him. This was one of his great attributes. Again, a flawed man, I get that. But on these topics, fabulous. Never called names. You ever go back and go on YouTube and look at a Kennedy press conference or a Kennedy rally or something, you'll see it's a totally different idea than our world today. And he was able to get in the House, the tax cuts passed before he was tragically assassinated. And then in the Senate, they were passed right after he was assassinated. And it worked. We had a lot of economic growth and optimism in the 1960s. Now, fast forward, I'm not going to go deep on this, but when Ronald Reagan ran for president in 1980, the economy and the country was in a shambles. These were pessimistic days. I was a young man, gone to Princeton, Federal Reserve Bank of New York, blah, 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 working on Wall Street. And Reagan comes through with these new ideas, which it turns out were new, but had been used by JFK, i.e. lower taxes, let incentives reward you for your success, don't punish success, reward success, and a strong dollar, and regulation, and so forth. But Reagan, who was just destroyed by the mainstream media, and he was down by 15 percentage points in his race in 1980 to Jimmy Carter in September, 15 percentage points. And Reagan goes to the Chicago Economics Club and gives a speech pledging to cut taxes and cut inflation at the same time. And in that speech, he cited John F. Kennedy several times. Now, it's interesting. JFK turned his back on New Deal economics as a Democrat. Reagan, who was a liberal Democrat for much of his career, turned his back on New Deal economics. And both were great persuaders. So I was there in 1981 for the first tax cut. I was whatever I was, 30-something kid, completely underqualified for my position. But I loved it. I learned a lot. And we had to talk to members of the House, which was in Democratic hands. And we couldn't have passed it without lots of Democratic votes, lots, like 70, 75 Democratic votes. And Reagan was a great persuader. He was calm, well-versed on the subject, believed it, had a great sense of humor, and never said a bad word about anybody who disagreed with him. Never. Never. And it worked. He got the votes. So those two men, presidents, came to the fore when America needed them. Their ideas were quite similar, but what I'm dwelling on, even more than the tax cuts, is their manner of behavior and persuasiveness, which we need today in our culture, in our political culture, in our business culture, in our literature and movies and everywhere. Now, I'm not going to go on forever on this. I hope I've made some points that ring to you. But I think on the issue of faith, which has changed my life so much, and so importantly, again, I come back to the fishers of men. because it's no good if you say it, but don't live it. You know, you can't legislate manners. You just can't. People ask me, how can we change the public discourse today? How can we restore civility and calmness? And I say, you know, the answer lies with you, and you, and you, and you, and all of us. We must lead by example. We must. Or else the dream's slipping away. And I don't believe that. I'm a perpetual optimist. I have faith. I have faith in God. I have faith in Jesus Christ. I have faith in the Holy Spirit. I have faith in America. This is the greatest country in the history of history. And we may make mistakes, but we overcome those mistakes. And I don't think you can do it without some help from faith. So me carrying the basket on Sundays, being a pain in the neck, I mean, I actually know the numbers, who's, you know, giving and who's not. I want to fill, this is my last thought, I want to fill the pews, the empty pews in my little church, St. Patrick Church in Reading, Connecticut. I want to fill those pews. The last several years, unfortunately, I've had to struggle with my pastor, who doesn't think we can have a noon mass on Sundays during the summer. I never got that. I said, well, Father, you know, you're a terrific, great leader and all, but isn't this what you do for a living? And, I'll do 2, but I won't do 3. All right. So I've searched far and wide to find priests, men of the cloth, to give me a Sunday noon mass. All right? And in so doing, I keep up the spirit whereby we can encourage people to come to that mass and their kids, their families, and fill the pews. So, you know, my bishop talks about this, evangelizing. Bishop Kudlow, evangelizing. I'm a layperson, but that doesn't mean I can't encourage people to come to Mass. If you get up early, which I don't, you can come to the early Mass. If you get up late, which I do, you can come to the noon Mass. God will applaud you. In any case, whatever the timing, he will applaud you. Lord Jesus will watch over you. But I think we have to put it in more crass terms, you're business people largely, we have to sell it. We have to sell it a little bit. The Catholic Church, the Mother Church, the Lord's Prayer, the Sermon on the Mount, all the wonderful things written and practiced, the stories, the humanity, the governance, the leadership, it's unbelievable. But we have to calmly go out there and ask people to come and try it. It may be like building up Legatus. You've had an explosive expansion. That's wonderful news. I would like to expand the population in the pews of my tiny St. Patrick Church the same way. Why? Well, I could use the money, honestly, yes. But having said that, I know for myself the benefit and joys of faith in the Catholic Church and its teaching. I know myself, I learned it the hard way, but maybe that's the best way. And every day, I remember it and do my best to follow those teachings. Particularly help people, don't hurt them. And I encourage people to live a life of faith. And we will see how all manner of life, civilization, and culture gets better. Let us not forget our great religion, the Catholic Church, and all of its traditions and all of its teachings. It worked for me, and it will work for everybody if we send that message. That's all I have. Thank you.
Please join us for the 2019 summit at the Monarch Beach Resort in Dana Point, California, January 24th through the 26th, 2019.